commend you for taking this time to invest time in your mental and physical health. This is my first session with your group, and I'm going to be doing another one later as well. So really excited to get to know you. As I go through this, feel free to pop any questions into the chat box. I'm going to ask for a little bit of engagement. So if you're open to sharing anything, you can also type things into there. So yeah, don't be shy, speak up if you need it, and just enjoy. You don't have to take notes if you don't want to, because I will be sending around a handout with recipes and a recap of everything we chatted about. So if you're a note taker and you like to do that anyway, I understand, I'm like that too. But you can also just sit back, relax. If you're having lunch or a drink or anything, just enjoy. So as mentioned, today we are talking about food for mood. So basically the goal of this session is to understand not only just, like what's healthy, what's not healthy, but actually understand how food can affect the way that you feel emotionally and mentally. By the way, I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm also a meal prep coach. I work with people one-on-one. I work with a lot of companies because I used to work in the corporate world myself, and I just know how important it is for you to be taking this time to take care of yourselves. And honestly, most of my one-on-one clients are also busy professionals like you. So this is my bread and butter. Delicious. Okay, so the issue that we're going to really address today is how it becomes really easy to feel fatigued, unmotivated, and burnt out when we're working, spending long hours looking at our screens, things like that, perhaps working at home sometimes, working in the office sometimes. Things like brain fog, unstable moods, unhealthy cravings can come up, and food just becomes overwhelming. We don't have time to shop or cook because we're busy. We end up reaching for the junk hiding in our cupboards instead of more nourishing foods. And we just let our nourishment of our bodies and minds fall to the wayside. So we're going to make it really simple today and bring it back to the basics so you can build a meal that gets you out of this funk if you're stuck here at all. So before I get into the session, I want you to take a minute and reflect. Think about what's going on in your life right now, and if any of these symptoms or concerns are sticking out to you. Maybe there's one, maybe there is a number, maybe you're feeling all of these, which is okay. I have been there. Don't worry, don't feel bad. I'm sure a lot of your colleagues feel the same way. If you're comfortable, you're welcome to submit something that's sticking out here in the chat box. Maybe it'll help other people feel less alone. Or just, share with your colleagues, your friends, your family, because they're probably feeling the same about something here, and they will feel a little better knowing that they're not alone. So, whether it's fatigue, lack of motivation, some of this stuff still comes up for me. Sometimes I feel like I don't know enough, or I don't have time to do the things I want to do. Stress gets in the way. So I want you to pick one out here, and I want you to keep it in your mind. And actually, you're going to grab either like a phone or a piece of paper or a Word document or just some sort of place where you can answer a couple questions on the next slide. And I want you to write down, so we're going to take about 2 minutes right now and write down that symptom or concern, whether it's the fatigue, the lack of motivation, the overwhelm. And then I want you to answer these questions. And I'll give you a few examples I'll give you one example of like what I would have done. So the reason we do this is because it just helps to frame what we're talking about today in our own lives. It helps with the motivation piece when you can actually pinpoint, okay, I want to make this better and this is going to help me. So for example, the problem could be, for me, a big one I used to experience all the time is burnout at the end of the day, just feeling burnt out and tired when I finish my workday. How it affects your day-to-day, how it makes you feel. For example, I felt like I didn't have the energy to take care of family, spend time with them, make myself a meal, anything like that. We're going to write down how you feel if you could fix it. So for me, I'd be able to enjoy evenings at the end of the workday and have the energy to do something fun. Versus how you feel if it continued. For example, feeling frustrated, lonely, depressed, feeling like you're missing out on the things that you love. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and give you this reflection time, and then we'll move on. It can be something that wasn't on that list as well, if there's just something that's sticking out to you. Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds, but if you need more time, that's fine too. All right, so a little bit about me. As I mentioned very briefly, I come from a corporate background, and this is helpful because it explains to you why I'm doing this today. So I worked in digital marketing and PR for the first 7 years of my career, and I had pretty crazy hours, very demanding clients, and I was just on all the time. And, eating what I thought was a healthy diet. I was exercising regularly. I was socializing when I could. I was also a total perfectionist, moving up in the world and looked like I was doing really well. But as it happens with many of us, I was falling apart under the surface. I was just completely stressed. I was burnt out all the time. I physically started having a lot of symptoms. I developed a lot of food allergies and sensitivities. I was constantly fatigued. I was anxious, honestly on the verge of a panic attack many days of the week. And I went to multiple doctors, a couple of allergists, a couple of naturopaths. I went to therapists. I took prescription and over-the-counter medications, all kinds of things, and nothing was helping. It just kept getting worse, and I was at my wit's end. But I also started thinking about this food portion. I always loved food. I loved cooking, recipe development. When I was younger, I studied journalism. I dreamed of being a food writer. And so I figured, how can I use this to my advantage? Why is it hurting me? So I started learning about how to manage my energy and my anxiety with food to placate that constant discomfort I was experiencing. And, I found things like preparing my meals ahead of time were really helpful because I knew I would have that nourishment that I needed. And I started understanding what I actually needed. And then over time, I started learning more about holistic nutrition and all the healing powers that it has, and I just began to feel so much better. And I was still seeing people all around me in my workplaces feeling the way that I was feeling before. So I knew it wasn't just me. And I decided I needed to go back to school and get certified. And then, combining that with my existing knowledge and love of cooking and recipe development, I decided it was time to help coach other busy professionals into stability and sanity. So here we are today in the holistic nutrition world. Just a quick summary of what holistic nutrition is, because I know there's nutritionists and naturopaths and dietitians, and it gets kind of confusing sometimes. So with holistic nutrition, it's food and more. We focus on the whole body, mind, body, spirit. So that can be also lifestyle habits, mindfulness, supplementation, and it's based on root cause healing. So what that means is it's not just, okay, I have a headache, let's take a pill for that headache, but I get migraines every week. Why is that? What can we do to heal the root cause so that I stop getting them? It's also not one size fits all. So you'll notice everything we talk about today, I'm going to keep somewhat high level. I'm not going to tell you exactly what foods to eat because honestly, every person is different. We all need something a little bit different depending on where we are in our health journey, where we are mentally, physically. But we can distill it down to basics, which is really what we're doing today. When I work one-on-one, we get very specific. Areas we address include things like mood, eating habits, stress management, energy, digestion, and we're going to talk about all of this today, but we're going to make it really simple. I know it seems like a lot of areas, but they really all fit together quite seamlessly. So we are going to start with the basics of food and energy. And that, to me, to most nutritionists, really starts with blood sugar balance. So this is a term that you might have heard about in relation to things like diabetes. So maybe if you or someone you know has it, you know a bit more about blood sugar. But honestly, I found in my life and with most of my clients, if that's not something that you struggle with or that your loved one struggles with, you don't really know much about it and you don't think it affects you. But it is important for every single one of us, regardless of our health situation, because blood sugar affects our mood, our energy, our cravings, our body weight, our heart health, inflammation in our body. So aches, pains, illness, all of that comes down to blood sugar at its core. And you can address these issues by simply putting together meals that balance it all out. So that's what we're going to be getting into shortly. But first, I'm going to explain a little bit about how blood sugar works, what it does, and how foods affect it. So glucose is the sugar molecule that results from any carbohydrate containing food. and it will raise your blood sugar. When I talk about carbohydrate containing foods, of course, bread, pasta, chips, rice, we all know about potatoes, but also really any fruit or vegetable will raise your blood sugar to some extent. So I want to say this because I want you to know that carbs are not bad. It's just we need to use them in the right ways. And what happens is when we consume glucose, what happens is then our pancreas are signaled to release insulin. And what insulin does is it delivers glucose to the right places. So it starts by delivering glucose to our cells. So let's say we have a muffin for breakfast, and then we go and we sit at our desk and we need some fuel for our cells. So we need fuels for our brain cells. We need fuel for every cell in our body, to be honest, our hearts, our muscles, breathing, digestion, all of that. So we do need some fuel. But if we're eating something like a muffin, a more processed carbohydrate rich food, unless we're doing a really intense workout and burning a ton of fuel, we likely won't need all of that glucose right at once. So we need to store it away somewhere for later. So what happens is once our cells have everything that they need, to function, to do our work, whatever it is, then we start putting glucose away in our short-term storage facility, which is our liver. So our liver can hold on to glucose and then release it when we need it, so that if we aren't eating, if we run out of glucose, we can have more on hand. However, our liver does have a finite amount of space, and what ends up happening is our livers get full too. This is why we now hear about kids having liver issues, juvenile, non-alcoholic, fatty liver disease, things like that, because we're eating really carbohydrate, really sugary foods all the time. They're just so readily available, and our livers can't store it all. So what happens is that anything that's remaining is now going into our fat cells, and this is our long-term storage facility. And by the way, fat cells are unlimited. So if we run out of space, we just produce more so that we can put more of that glucose into storage and hopefully use it later. But what happens a lot of the time is we continue on this glucose train and we keep adding more, so it just kind of sits there and builds up. So where do we find sugar? These are some of the biggest culprits of those glucose-dense foods, and some of them are quite obvious. Concentrated sugars, so things like white or brown sugar, maple, corn, agave syrup, honey, molasses. A little sneakier is anything on a label that you see that ends in ose. You see like dextrose or maltose. Those all contain glucose. Processed foods as well, things like bread, cereal, tomato sauces, definitely low fat options, because when you take out fat, you need to add something to make it taste good. So processed foods often contain sugars that we might not realize. So a little challenge for you is next time you go into your cupboard or go to the grocery store and you're buying something like this that seems like it might just be really basic ingredients, look at the ingredient list, see if they add sugar in there, because they really do it a lot. It's very, the food industry, they want things to taste really good. They want you to keep eating them. Also refined grains. So these might not actually contain one of those sugar ingredients in them, but things like breads, pastries and cereals generally contain sugars, but even if they don't, they're heavily refined, they're milled down into this tiny little powdery white flour, and we consume them and right away, they get burned up so quickly that they become glucose almost immediately. So they end up behaving very similarly to concentrated sugars when we're eating those refined flours. Foods that can spike our blood sugar may, unfortunately, I'm sorry, be some of your favorite foods. So just a few things to take a look at. These all contain refined carbohydrates and or added sugars, maybe some other sneaky things. So as I mentioned, really important to start looking at our labels, because you can buy healthier versions. Some of these foods are easy to buy without the ingredients. You just need to check the labels. You can also make a lot of them at home. My husband loves granola. I make granola all the time for him. And things like, it's not that these are all bad. It's just that we need to figure out how to eat them in the right ways. I eat potatoes, but how are we eating them? We're going to get into this shortly. But before we talk about the actual foods and how to make that perfect meal, let's talk about how eating sugar affects you and why you don't feel so great when you eat a lot of it, and why we need to be aware of the blood sugar cycle. So very basic little chart I put together here that shows where we would like to be versus where we are. So if we look at the blue line, there's like this gentle rise and fall of glucose over time after we eat a meal. So we're seeing basically, okay, we're eating that muffin at the beginning. We're not going to be on that blue line. Unfortunately, most of us are on the red line right now, which is what's making us feel fatigued, anxious, unhappy, brain foggy, all of that. So we want to get back to the blue line. But the reason that we're on the red line is, let's go back to the muffin. Basically, what happens when we eat that muffin, we're at number 1 right now, is these quick burning carbohydrates or sugars, it's got both in there, cause their blood sugar to spike very rapidly. Because let's face it, our ancestors did not have muffin trees, they did not have bagel trees, they were not foraging for these refined processed foods that we so easily have access to today. And our bodies don't really know how to deal with it because it's not what they have evolved to eat. It's been very recent in the last couple hundred years where we started eating a lot more refined carbohydrates. Even the last 50 years, the amount of sugar we eat is much more than the generation before us ate. And what happens now, okay, so we've got a really big spike of blood sugar. And what happens with number 2 now is this results in a quick and excessive release of insulin in an effort to shuttle that sugar out of our bloodstream as quickly as possible, because our pancreas are saying, oh no, this is too much, we're not safe, we need to get this blood sugar out. But they overreact because, once again, they don't know how much insulin to release in response to a muffin. And now this surplus of insulin, we're at number 3 here, is causing our blood sugar to drop too low. And now our body is more stressed out. We go into survival mode. We need to hunt for more sugar. We start to crave more because we're worried that we're not safe and we don't have fuel. And now going back to number 4 and then back again to the beginning, we end up on this roller coaster of ongoing stress, hunger, mood, and energy swings because we just keep craving more carbohydrates to get that glucose level back up. And then it just goes up and down all day long. So, when you're going and you're buying a cookie or grabbing a bag of chips at the coffee shop, or like a really sugary drink or something like that, we're just perpetuating this cycle. And we can start to feel some of these signs if we are in balance all the time. So nervousness, hyperactivity, anxiety, mood swings, fatigue, those cravings, addictions, weight gain, infections, getting sick easily as well. And then longer term things like high cholesterol, insulin resistance, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. But don't worry, we're going to get off this roller coaster now. We can turn things around. We just need to know what's causing our blood sugar to spike and how we can balance it out with smart meals. I'm going to pause for a second because I threw all the science stuff at you, try to break it down pretty simply. But if there are any questions right now, please let me know before we move on to our next section. All right, I'm going to trust that I've done a good job at explaining that, and we are going to get into the fun stuff. How to balance blood sugar with our food. As I mentioned, we can still have things like carbohydrates in moderation. We just need to know how to do it properly. So let's talk about how to use food to our advantage by following just a few simple guidelines. Every meal that you consume, including snacks, should include these 3 elements: protein, fiber, and healthy fat. I'm going to get into examples of that shortly. The reason for this is that carbohydrates, sugars, glucose, are the quickest digesting macronutrient of all. So they digest much more quickly than protein and fats. So fat is the slowest digesting macronutrient, then protein, then carbohydrates. Fiber is actually part of carbohydrates if we're eating fiber-rich fruits, vegetables, whole grains, things like that. And all of these are going to help to slow down absorption into the bloodstream if we combine them with carbohydrates. So what happens is now the amount of glucose hitting the bloodstream at a given time, if we're eating something with carbohydrates, is slowed down. So we get that steady trickle versus it all hitting right at once because we just burn through it right away. I'll give a tangible example so you can explain what I mean. By the way, it also keeps you full longer because you are literally physically digesting it slower and it's hitting the bloodstream slower. So example here is apple juice. It's just sugar. They've removed everything from it. There is no fiber, just sugar. Not a satisfying snack. No one drinks a glass of fruit juice and says, wow, I'm satisfied. I don't need anything else. Thank you. We're going to want more, right? So now let's try eating the whole apple with the fiber. There's fiber, you can taste it, you can feel it when you're chewing it in the flesh, in the skin. It's helping to slow down that digestion and absorption of the sugar. So now we're going to be full a little bit longer. However, what if we took something that contained protein and fat, like an unsweetened, please, nut or seed butter, because nuts and seeds contain fat and protein. And now we slice up that apple and we spread on our favorite, almond butter, peanut butter, cashew. If you want nut free, you could do like pumpkin seed, sunflower, tahini. Spread that on there. Now we're going to have a satisfying snack that's going to take us through that little lull in the day where we need a boost. So this is a great option if, for example, you have a break between like lunch and dinner that's pretty long and you need a snack. Try this one out. Now that we've built a balanced snack, let's talk about building a balanced plate with the protein, the fiber, and the healthy fats. This is kind of what it should look like visually. It doesn't mean it's the weight distribution, but vegetables tend to be pretty fluffy, and your plate generally isn't like 75% meat, right? So let's start with that biggest section. Let's start with the 75% plant section, or your fiber section, one of the important elements, right? Here we want to aim for mostly leafier and low carb vegetables. You can certainly do some starchier roots like, potatoes, sweet potato, beets, things like that, and grains, but they are optional. Some people do well eating grains. Some people feel less great eating grains. They are higher in carbohydrates, but a lot of people can consume them. I certainly eat them sometimes. The reason for these is number one, digestion. As we know, fiber is really helpful for moving things through our body, helping us digest and break down our food. It helps us to eliminate toxins because we are moving everything through our body. It also gives us energy because, as we mentioned, right, fiber is part of carbohydrate containing foods. So if there is fiber, there's going to be carbohydrates. So we're going to get some of that fuel to get us through the day. It also gives us micronutrients. Different colors of fruits and veggies actually have different representations of different nutrients most of the time. So I often tell my clients to aim for, 2 different colors on their plate. Things that are orange tend to have more, vitamin A, vitamin C. Things that are green tend to have more iron, more magnesium, etc. So we need a diverse range of micronutrients, and different vegetables will help us get that. Finally, gut health. So this is so important. You may have heard about this term that's been used more in the last few years, the gut-brain connection, because our gut and our brain are completely 100% connected. We send all kinds of messages up to our brain from our gut. And when our gut is unhealthy, we can't do that. So when we eat fiber, it nourishes the bacteria that are in our gut. If you've heard, about probiotic bacteria, those healthy things that now a lot of us take in supplement form or through fermented foods. We need to keep feeding those, and probiotic bacteria feed off of fiber. So when we eat fiber, we feed the gut bacteria, and then we produce these neurotransmitters in our gut that then get sent up to our brain that make us feel good. Things like, serotonin, dopamine, we need all of those, and we can't get them if our gut is not healthy. So that is why fiber is so important. Examples, things that are leafier, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, lettuce, starchier things like sweet potato, like carrots, whatever you like. I like to go with what's in season, which right now is a lot of different beautiful foods. So pick your favorite and fill up a plate. The next section here is our serving of protein. So fist-sized serving of protein if it's an animal protein. So the reason for that is that animal proteins are pure protein, whereas a plant-based protein, so animal proteins, things like steak, chicken, salmon, eggs, these are largely protein. They've got fat in them as well. Plant-based protein also generally contains carbohydrates, things like beans, lentils, chickpeas. They are still going to have other elements in them, so you're going to need a larger quantity, maybe like a third of your plate, to get the correct amount of protein. They do also contribute to your plant part though. And the reason that we need this is growth and repair. We need proteins to basically repair anything in our bodies. It's why people, drink protein shakes and things like that when they work out, because we need to repair muscles when we damage them. But all day long, everything we do is wearing down those tissues and muscles, so we need to replenish. It also affects our mood. So those feel-good neurotransmitters that I mentioned on the last slide, the ones that make us feel happy, give us energy, they are actually derived from protein. So the individual amino acids that are in proteins they're the building blocks of those neurotransmitters. So if we don't eat the fiber, and then we don't keep our gut healthy with the fiber, sorry, did I say fiber and fiber? We don't eat the protein and the fiber, we can't get the happy, feel good serotonin, dopamine that we need to feel happy in our brain. And then the final section here, I put it off to the side just because it often ends up on top of our food. I wasn't really sure where to put it, is our healthy fat section. So what I mean here is 1 tablespoon, and honestly a minimum of 1 tablespoon of healthy oil. You can do as much as you want. These are good quality oils. When I talk about healthy oils, I'm referring to olive, avocado, coconut, anything that comes from a whole real food that actually contains the fat. That's a good way to know that it's a healthy oil. If you tolerate, grass-fed butter or ghee, that's also a good option, or, grass-fed tallow, animal fat is fine as well, or a portion of a fat-containing food. So that could be something like tahini. Maybe you put like a big scoop of that on your vegetables or dip them in. It could be half an avocado. It could be a handful of olives, nuts, seeds, whatever you need. The reason we have fat is, number one, it gives us tons of energy. We also can be fueled not just by carbohydrates, but also by fat. And especially for our brain is nearly 60% fat. So we really need to be fueling our brains with fat if we want to avoid things like brain fog and fatigue and, memory issues, all of that. We need the healthy fats. It also makes us feel full. It is the slowest digesting macronutrient. It is higher calorie. We don't need as much of it to feel full. So it's really satisfying, really nourishing. And also cellular health. Every single cell in our body is surrounded by a membrane that is made up of fat. So if we're not eating fats, we're not making our cells healthy. And then those cells that I mentioned we fuel, our brain cells, our heart cells, our muscle cells, our digestive cells, they suffer as well. Even things like our skin, our nails, our hair, all the things that make us look good too. So yeah, it's a great way to feel really satisfied. Even something like, as I mentioned, a spoonful of nut butter, a handful of nuts or seeds, it's just going to give you that boost if you're feeling like you're crashing late in the day or early in the day, who knows. Any questions so far? Here are a few examples of balance plates that I have made in the past. I'm just going to break down so that you can see what we talked about with the building a balance plate, and it'll make it easier for you to go away and build one yourself. However, I'm also going to give you a book at the end of this with like 5 recipes in it. So if you want to do none of the guesswork and just have it done for you, that's another option. So the first one here are pretty obvious. We've got all of our vegetables, all kinds of plants. Some of them are roasted, some of them are fresh, whatever you like. The healthy fats are tossed around on the vegetables that I roasted. There's like olive oil in there. There's also healthy fats on the chicken, which is mostly protein, but contains healthy fats in the skin. If you're using something like an organic pasture-raised chicken or any sort of healthy, ethically raised meat, the fats are healthy and you can totally eat them. You don't need to fear the skin if you're buying good quality. If you're buying lower quality, maybe stick to slightly leaner cuts. If it's just not available to you, if it's not within budget, things like that. And get your fats more from those plant-based healthy oils and fats and things that we talked about. Second option, a little more hidden here because it's a smoothie, so it's all blended up. I made mine into a pretty smoothie bowl, which you do not have to do. This is my job, so I like to make things pretty, but it is completely unnecessary to do so. Okay, so what's in here? We've got our protein in the form of a protein powder, or if you don't have that, you could do something like hemp hearts. We've got fiber in the form of berries, some spinach, maybe some flax seeds, and then healthy fats in the form of, avocado or some coconut milk, things like that. Blend it all up. If you want to put some crunchy stuff on top to make it more satisfying. I find a smoothie to be such a great snack, like a breakfast or lunch if you don't have time for much more, and very satisfying if you include those 3 elements. Salad, another really easy lunch for dinner. You can throw this together in just a few minutes. We've got tons of fiber, of course. There's all the vegetables. We've got healthy fats in the form of avocado, olives, hemp hearts, and then also in this smoked mackerel, which I bought pre-cooked, ready to go, just broke it up on top. That's our that's our protein and our healthy fats. And the hemp hearts also have more protein in them. So lots of options here, whether you're eating plants, whether you're eating meat, to get in those different elements. I'm going to assume everyone is understanding everything because I don't see anything in the chat. But if you have any questions or just even about the specific ingredients I mentioned, about quality, things like that, don't be shy. I'm happy to answer. Okay, so now that we know how to build the balanced plate, we did the snack, we did the meal, let's set ourselves up for success without stress. So I know I talked at the beginning about some of the overwhelm that can come with just not knowing what to eat or not having the time to do it or the time to shop. I just want to share a few quick tips that are going to make it easier for you to actually build these healthy meals when you're short on time, resources, brain power, all of that. Because yes, it's all well and good to say these are great meals, but how do we actually make them happen when we're busy? We have jobs, families, friends, social lives. So, and it's summer. I don't know about you. I definitely spend a lot less time in the kitchen in the summer because I just want to be outside in the sunshine. Oops. So number one, sounds really simple and everyone probably knows they should do it, but planning ahead, just something as simple as you don't necessarily have to plan out your entire meal, but plan out, okay, I need this many servings of protein, this many servings of vegetables, and make a grocery list before you shop. Because then you're not spending all this time in the grocery store wandering around looking for what they have. Of course, you can buy things that aren't on the list, or if something's in season or something you didn't expect excites you, add it on. But it just makes it easier to get in and get out of there more quickly. I know that my husband and I, we love to do like those shared little notes on our, the iPhones have them. And we just add to the grocery list so that when one of us goes shopping, we already know what to get. We've been talking about it, we've planned it out, and it becomes much easier than having to sit down and make a whole plan at the end of the week. Number two, buying long-lasting ingredients. So let's say you're only shopping once a week because you're busy and that's what we have time for. I mostly shop once a week, although I did an extra shop yesterday because I wanted a bunch of local fruit. It's amazing. They have like strawberries and cherries at the grocery store now. But yeah, consider things that are going to last longer to buy them just in case or for later in the week. So long-lasting vegetables, things like root veggies, so potatoes, sweet potato, beets, turnips, things like squash, things like cabbage. These all last for a really long time. They have a very long shelf life. So they're a great option if, some of the other things like your lettuces, your tomatoes, whatever, they don't taste as great after a few days. Frozen produce is also an excellent option. So whether it's frozen berries and fruits that you're putting in your smoothies, whether it's frozen veggies like, I don't know, I buy frozen cauliflower rice, frozen broccoli florets, frozen zucchini noodles, things that just make life really easy. They're just great to have on hand and speed up the process. I even put some frozen vegetables in my smoothies sometimes. I love frozen cauliflower in smoothies. It's so creamy. And I wanted to mention here, a lot of people think that frozen produce is less healthy, but it's actually full of all kinds of nutrients because frozen produce is flash frozen on site when it is picked almost all the time. And the thing about a lot of vitamins is that they tend to degrade over time as soon as the plant is picked. So let's think about this, and let's think about especially when it's not summertime and we don't have produce locally and we're getting stuff shipped from Mexico or California and it's sitting on a truck or a plane for a couple weeks before it gets to us, and then it's in the warehouse at the grocery store. It's degrading in nutrients, whereas the frozen stuff is coming to us directly. It's been frozen, and then we thaw it, and we still get all those vitamins and minerals. So don't think that frozen isn't as good. It's a great option, and done is better than perfect, right? It's always better to have fruits and vegetables than to have the vegetable that was picked down the road yesterday. Dried and canned legumes are also great. So like lentils, beans, chickpeas, really easy. If they're canned, they're ready to eat. If they're dried, you just need to, soak them, cook them, whatever you do with them. They're just a good thing to have around if you are worried that you're running out of protein. And for non-plant-based options, things like tinned fish are also a great pantry staple. So, sardines, salmon, tuna, things like eggs last quite a while as well, or ground meat, which I love, whether it's beef, turkey, chicken, pork, whatever you like. It freezes really well and thaws really quickly. So I like to keep those in like vacuum sealed little 1 pound packages and just pull them out of the freezer whenever I need them for like a quick meat sauce or chili or whatever you want. Next one, healthy snacks, because, oh, I'm going to pause because I see a question here actually. What is your feeling about vegetarian proteins like those chicken fingers or meatballs, which seem quite processed? I'm trying to find ways to get more protein to vegetarian teenagers. This is a great question, and I was vegetarian for 10 years as a teenager as well. Yeah, so my answer to that I'm not a huge fan of like fake meats because a lot of the time they are just trying to mimic what something else is, but they're adding a lot of funky ingredients to it. So I definitely would recommend you look at the ingredients. They have a lot of icky things, especially if you're looking at things that are like non-organic, heavily processed soy and pea, like those kinds of proteins. They're generally pretty heavily sprayed with pesticides. They're not the best quality. There are certain brands that are made with more like healthy real foods that actually use things like, you know, chickpeas, lentils, organic soy, you know, like bean burgers, things like that, that I prefer. I know it's hard sometimes with teenagers, especially when they're picky, because they don't always want to eat all the real whole foods. But I would say, like, you know, don't feel bad, keep it to a minimum, try to find the healthier versions. There are definitely options where you look at the ingredients and it's immediately you realize, okay, this is real food. And other ones you look at and it's got all these like processed oils and sugars and ingredients you've never heard of that make you perhaps want to think twice. So yeah, that's my like long answer about vegetarian proteins. I prefer to stick to whole foods as much as possible. If they eat things like eggs, that's also a great option to throw in there. Really easy. Most people like them. So yeah, good luck with that. I know it's a challenge. We can. Other things like a good quality protein powder to add to smoothies and stuff can also help add more protein because we really do need it at every meal. Okay. Back to healthy snacks. Also helpful for picky teenagers because everyone likes a good snack. This sounds really obvious, but if you buy the junk food, you're gonna eat the junk food. And I know that over the last couple of years, my clients have definitely picked up some unhealthy habits where they keep a lot of junk in their cupboard. And here's the thing, if it's there and you're craving something, you are gonna eat it. So my recommendation to you right now, add this to your grocery list, is start brainstorming and thinking of healthy snacks that you're going to be excited to eat. And if you have kids, if you have family members, do this with them. Get them to add their own things to the list as well. This is honestly my favorite time of year for snacks because there are a million incredible fruits. I just bought so much. And you know, people get excited about fruit things, as I mentioned, the strawberries, the cherries, the peaches, watermelon. Buy a few that seem fun to you and then pair them up with some nuts, some seeds, some dark chocolate. I also love doing like dark chocolate. I aim for 70% and higher, so it's not too sugary, and then maybe spreading on some natural peanut butter or something like that for like a healthy peanut butter cup mimicking thing. You can also make simple homemade treats. So here I have like a homemade trail mix I put together with just a lot of fun ingredients. I also have this 3-ingredient vegan fudge. It's on my website, on my blog, by the way, if you want to check it out. It's super simple and it's like free of every allergen. Everyone can eat it. A great thing to make and keep around in the fridge. And I'm also going to be sending you an energy ball recipe in the booklet. So just a few options for things. You can make them in big batches to have them around. And certainly there are lots of packaged foods that are pretty healthy still, but start looking at your labels and start tuning into, okay, is this real food? Is this going to make me feel good? Does it have protein? Does it have healthy fats? Next tip is batch cooking. Meal prepping is a lifesaver. I make every one-on-one client that I work with my clients in like a 12-week program. Every single one of them does a virtual cooking session with me where we cook together and prep as much food as possible in like, you know, an hour to an hour and a half so that you're not cooking every day. When you have the time, whether it's a Wednesday evening, whether it's a Sunday afternoon, block some time and just prepare as much food as you possibly can. Definitely, I never make one serving of food unless it's like a 5-minute thing. If you're cooking, you know, if you're going shopping and you buy a chicken breast or two and you buy like a sweet potato, why don't you just buy 3 or 4 times that much, throw them all in the sheet pan. It takes the same amount of time, get them done. And now you can cut them up and use them in different ways. You can put them on a salad, you can put them in a wrap, but then you're not cooking constantly. And even just washing things, you know, the simple, like once you're washing lettuce, just wash all of it. Once you're cutting up a couple carrot sticks, just cut up a whole bunch and put them in a container. You know, make your life easier. And, you know, also buying things that are pre-washed, pre-cut, that's fine too. Do whatever you need to do. But preparing yourself so that you can just grab and go and you're not constantly worrying about what your next meal is going to be. Best advice I can give. I generally cook at least like 6 servings of food at a time so that my husband and I have meals for like 3 meals. When I work with clients with families, we do even more than that. And the nice thing also about cooking kind of like bits and pieces is if you do have picky eaters or kids, or I don't know, my husband used to be super picky too. You can kind of pick and choose what you like. So you can cook like a few different vegetables, a couple different proteins, and just mix them up. Finally, do not be a perfectionist. As I said, done is better than perfect. If you don't have an ingredient on hand that goes in a recipe, just use something else. If you're out of fresh produce, use frozen produce. Do not deprive yourself. If all you have in your house is bread and you're like a bagel or something, and you're like, well, that's not healthy. Think about what you can do to make it more healthy. Can you spread some natural nut butter on it? Do you have like some tuna in the pantry? Can you like smush some berries or slice up a banana to go on that peanut butter and bagel situation? Like, what can you do to make it a little bit better? Because if you're starving yourself, you are going to be stressed. You are going to eat the wrong things. You are going to have cravings. Not going to help you out. So just do what you can and then do better next time. This is all a learning curve. It's a process. Nobody does it right the first time. I certainly did not. It took me a long time. If I'd had a coach, it probably would have been a lot faster. But we all learn in our own way. And finally, as I mentioned, you don't have to do it on your own. Find the right professional for you. Look for resources to make life easier. Look for people with free tips. So, as I mentioned, I do work with clients one-on-one. If you are interested in learning more about working with someone like me, feel free to reach out to me. I'm at rootedbyjordana.com or at rootedbyjordana on Instagram, on Facebook, and then resources. So I'm already going to be giving you this booklet with recipes to get you started. Following people on social media that resonate with you, that make you excited to cook. I do that all the time. I'm always on my stories. I'm always sharing posts, recipes, tips, mindsets, hacks, all that is available. And I'll also mention I have a free ebook if you go to my website on the homepage with a ton more blood sugar balancing recipes, specifically for breakfast, because I find starting with breakfast sets us up for success the rest of the day. So it's always the first thing that I do with my clients. So just some free resources for you if you want extra support and you just don't have time to think all this through and plan it out. That's always available. All right, we are at the recap section here. So here is what we talked about today, just in case some of it fell out of your brain, because I know I threw a lot at you. High sugar foods are going to cause low energy, mood swings, and cravings, but we can combat these blood sugar spikes and crashes with fiber, protein, and healthy fats. Always those three. Every meal and snack, think about that trifecta now. Planning ahead to reduce stress, the grocery list, writing down what you're going to eat, buying long-lasting ingredients and healthy snacks, put those in your list, get them stocked in your pantry. Cooking in batches, so making sure you are meal prepping and you don't have to cook every single meal all the time. And asking for help, looking for support, looking for guidance when you need it. Finally, as I mentioned, and I put this in like every presentation I do, pace yourself. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to give it all to you in that handout. Work through it as you're ready to do. You don't have to make every single change at once. When I work with my clients one-on-one, we go at a pace that is comfortable for them. And if that is literally just drinking more water the first week and changing your one breakfast the next week, that's the pace we go. Because this isn't like a quick fix diet thing where you do it for a couple weeks and you're done. This is a lifestyle change. And the best lifestyle changes are ones that are sustainable and last. So go at a pace that feels good for you. And don't stress if it takes you like a year to get there. That's okay. It will go faster if you work with someone. Not trying to tell you to work with me or anything, but I definitely took way too long. Okay, so back to this list here and what you wrote down. Go back to your little journal that you did at the beginning. And think about which tip you're willing to try to help with these symptoms and what is the one thing that you are going to implement right away. Maybe your opinion has changed a little since we started talking. Maybe you're feeling a little more motivated. And I want you to write down that one thing. So whether it is making a grocery list, whether it is starting with a blood sugar balancing breakfast, whether it's just making a list of snacks, whatever that thing is, write it down. If you do want to share with the group, I always like to hear, or even just with me in the chat. Pick one thing that really resonates with you that feels easy that you can start immediately. It could literally just be like one healthy snack that you put on your list. Okay, so I kind of already talked about this, so I won't dwell on it. If you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, yes, healthy breakfast, perfect place to start. I definitely recommend you get my free breakfast guide on my website. It will just make your life much easier. There's like 6 recipes in there. Anyone else wants to share? I was like hearing your goals and excited things. Yeah. I know, like no joke, that is the first thing I make every client do once we start drinking water. Water, healthy breakfast. Key to a good foundation. So if you do have any questions, I am gonna leave things open for the next few minutes. You're welcome to share them here. If you have anything that's a little more personal or that you don't want to share here, you are welcome to reach out to me via email or on social media. I'm always in the DMs, especially on Instagram, and you'll get my contact info on that handout as well.